Hello, bookworms. Welcome to The Best Book Ever, the podcast where we talk about your favorite books. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and today I'm so pleased to talk to my friend, Zenobia Neil. Zenobia was born with a shock of red hair and named after an ancient warrior woman who fought against the Romans. In college, she studied ancient Greece, voodoo, and world mythology. She writes historical fantasy about the mythic past and Greek and Roman gods having too much fun. I had a blast talking to her about why A Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller is the best book ever. And I'll tell you this, I enjoy most of the books I read for this podcast, but I don't often call them my best book ever. They're my guests' favorite books, but they're usually not mine. This book, however, is for sure one of my top 10 books of the year, even though it's early in the year, and will probably go down as one of my top 10 books ever. It was a great book. I'm really excited to hear what you think of it. If you're looking for a way to help support this podcast that is free and takes up very little of your time, why not leave a review on whatever podcatcher you use? Through some sort of magical algorithm system that I don't fully understand, if a podcast has reviews, it's suggested to new listeners more often. So do it right now. Just scroll down on your phone and hit the Leave a Review button. It'll take just a few seconds of your time, and it really helps me out. I'm super grateful for your support. Now, back to the show. Hi, Zenobia. Welcome to the Best Book Ever podcast.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me again. We've been through this once before, and the gods of technology did not agree with us. So this time, you've got me praying to whatever Greek god controls the internet. And I don't know who that is, but I'm assuming you know.
Do some research on that.
There must be someone.
I'm sure there are several people.
Zenobia, can you tell me about your beautiful name?
Yeah. So I was named after Zenobia of Palmyra. She was a Syrian who fought the Romans, and that was a pretty big deal. And they had a treaty with her husband, and then he died, and then they kind of reneged on it, and she fought for her land, and then she was captured and taken back to Rome in chains, where she lived out the rest of her life in a Roman villa.
So that is a big and unusual name to give to a child. What are your parents like that they came across that name?
My parents are into a lot of ancient things. I don't really know why my father chose that name for me. But I mean, it is a big name to give a baby, but like they never were going to give me any kind of normal name. So I feel like I kind of got lucky. It wasn't worse.
So you were never going to be a Jane, but at least they didn't give you something really terrifying.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, like, is it exhausting or is it super cool to have every single person say, oh, that's a neat name?
You know what? I think it's a lot like having red hair. Like when you're a child, it's such a drag. But when you get older, it becomes more interesting and easier to deal with. Yeah.
So it almost seems like you were destined to be someone who reads and writes about the ancients. What was your reading life like when you were a kid?
So I read a lot as a kid. So I grew up in a Victorian house, and we didn't have like a lot of modern things. I mean, I had a TV. Yeah.
Hang on. We're going to back up. What do you mean you grew up in a Victorian house? What does that mean?
So my parents bought a Victorian house in Echo Park in the 70s. And that's where I grew up. So, and we would have house tours, and like once a year we'd have house tours, and all the like people who are really into Victorian stuff would come, like the people on the one big wheeled bicycles, and the Helms Bakery truck woman who would be like dressed as a man smoking a pipe. And
I'll bet you $100 my parents have toured your house.
Probably. At some point I should write about Victorian stuff. Like the woman who we said was our ghost, Lola Estrada, who died in the cozy corner talking on the phone to her boyfriend. She was like 90 and he was 70.
Oh my God. This is real, or this is something you guys invented?
This is real. So that's the only person who died in the house. And then we also had a lot of movies shot in the house when I was growing up.
No kidding.
It was a bordello in like the TV remake of East of Eden, and they made like gold and orange flocked wallpaper.
So you grew up there, and you were saying you didn't have TV.
Well, I mean, we had like, I had like basic TV.
Okay.
I think I watched like the A-Team or
Okay.
was, a big one. But like it wasn't like a TV centric family culture. So I read a lot of books, and I think Clan of the Cave Bear was probably my first historical fiction. And I read a lot of Stephen King. And then they actually filmed Salem's Lot, like a TV version of Salem's Lot in the house and on the street.
Oh my God, that house is so haunted.
By ghosts of grips and best boys. Yeah. So, I mean, I read a lot, and I always just really enjoyed reading.
When did you get into mythology?
Well, so when I was little, my parents got divorced and took me to Paris and like to try one more time to make it work. But they told me that it was my 4th birthday present. So, I thought that was like a normal 4th birthday present to just take a trip to Paris. And my mom and I would go to the Louvre, and she would just like sit there and tell me the stories behind all the paintings. I mean, not all the paintings, or we would still be there, but the mythological paintings. So I had a great love of it, like as a kind of bedtime story situation. And then in 7th grade, we studied Deleuze, the Deleuze book of Greek myths. I don't know if I'm saying it properly, but
is this still yours from 7th grade that you're showing?
Yes, it is. And the funny thing is that that my 7th grade English teacher was Katie McGovern, who's Elizabeth McGovern's mother from Lady Grantham's mother, basically was my English teacher who taught me to love mythology.
Oh my God.
So it's kind of funny.
Los Angeles is a magical place.
Yeah, it can be.
How did you come across this book that we're talking about today, A Song of Achilles? So
I got an advanced reader copy, I guess, right in 2012. My husband worked at Skylight Books, support independent bookstores. And so he saw
one of the best ones.
Yeah, it's really great. It's such a great bookstore. He saw the cover and he knew that I liked stuff like this. So he brought it home for me, and I read it and loved it and didn't realize that it was so popular until much later.
I have the same front cover that you have. And that's actually one of the things I wanted to bring up to you, because the whole time I was reading this, I was thinking, this is a paperback copy. Mm-hmm. And it's got sort of this raised gold. What is the name of this gold helmet? Is it Greek?
It's just a helmet. I mean, I'm sure that there are specific names for but it's just like a basic helmet.
Okay. So it's got this warrior's helmet in gold, and it's embossed. Mm-hmm. And the whole time I was reading it, I was thinking, this is a book for book lovers, because this is going to sound bizarre, but you are a book lover, so you'll understand. It is such a pleasure to hold this in your hands.
Totally.
It feels very tactile, mm-hmm. and it has this great feeling of being shiny and new, but also the bumpiness. It feels mm-hmm. very ancient. I was absolutely charmed by just the way this book felt. And also, I had just read 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Hanff, and she has a big section about the buttery leather of some books that she ordered. So I was really thinking anyway about how books feel before I read this. And so as I was reading this, I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's just perfectly made.
Yeah. And it does. It feels really like good and solid in your hands. Like, you're going to go on this amazing adventure.
Yeah. So tell me, how do you describe this book? Like, how do you hand it off to people?
I mean, it's a love story between Achilles and Patroclus, told from Patroclus's point of view. in the first person, and it's sometimes present tense. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I feel like it's a song of Achilles told by the person who loved him the most.
You obviously knew the myth very well going in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The myth of Achilles. So
Yeah.
how were you were still intrigued by this?
Totally. Yeah. Because I mean, the first person, the present tense, it gives you this immediacy to something that took place so long ago. And I feel like reading this, one of the things that really is so cool about the myth of Achilles is that it can be interpreted in so many different ways and it doesn't get old.
What does that mean, that it can be interpreted in different ways?
Well, so I've been looking at this story, and like I've listened to the Iliad somewhat recently, and I watched the movie Troy, and I also have been reading The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which is the total opposite of this version of Achilles. Like it's Achilles is a monster in that book. So it's interesting to see him as this lover and best friend in this book. So I feel like, I really believe that there's like no one truth, that there are just many different versions of people have different perspectives on everything. I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't truth, but like, some people are like, it's the one truth. And it's like, well, no, because everybody has a different life experience and everybody has different ways of looking at things. And so I love seeing this story told in this like loving perspective.
All of the versions that you just mentioned, are they all takeoffs on the Iliad, or are they all takeoffs on the myth of Achilles, which was just handed down orally?
That's a really good question. I think that the bulk of it is from the Iliad, but there's a bunch of extra stuff. So the crazy thing about the Iliad, when I listened to it, which was so fun to listen to it because it was meant to be told instead of read. I mean, I think it was meant to be sung, but like, it was really fun to listen to it while I was walking around and stuff and imagine this oral story happening. So I think, so that one, the Iliad itself stops like way before the Trojan horse. Okay. It stops with like the funeral games for Hector. I feel like I should be like, spoiler alert, but I think we got it. So I think that it's a combination of stuff from the Iliad, but also the myth of Achilles that everybody just knows.
I didn't going into it. I had, and I'm not kidding when I said I had a glancing knowledge. I was thinking, oh, Achilles. Yeah, he's the one who was dipped into the ocean, right?
The river Styx.
The river Styx. Oh, of course. And so I didn't know how it was going to end. I mean, you always figure with mythology, someone's probably going to die, right? But
it's a good guess.
But I have to say that going into this without being completely sure how it ended made it heartbreaking, because I didn't know it was going to end like that. And it broke my heart. I guess I kind of thought, well, okay, we don't have to give a spoiler alert.
I know. I mean, that's the thing I want to talk to you about the end too, but I don't want to.
No, let's talk about it. It's an ancient myth. I think I'm the only person on the planet who was surprised. I was like, God damn, he died.
That was the thing for me when I was reading it in 2012 or whatever. I was like, wait a minute, how is this is a first person narrative, right? How is he gonna make this work?
And what a trick to pull off too. I would highly recommend it, now you know the ending, whoever's listening, but
you know what? It's funny. I feel like there have been times when I've watched Romeo and Juliet, and even though I know what's going to happen, I'm still like, don't, maybe somehow this time that will work out, like it's just funny because it's like, you think, I mean, some stories are just so compelling throughout time, even though the story, like getting to the end isn't the thing, it's the journey that's the thing. So it's like, even when you know the end, or some books, start and tell you what's going to happen, but it's like, how did we get here? And how is this person going to interpret this story in their own unique way?
Tell me again the name of the one that was sort of a negative portrayal of
Oh,
Achilles.
so it's called The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. And it's told from Briseis' point of view. She was his prize for conquering her city. And then when Agamemnon took Chrysis, who was the daughter of the priest of Apollo, was Agamemnon's war prize. And then when the priest of Apollo came to take her back, Agamemnon said no. And then Apollo sent a plague upon the Greeks. And that's where the Iliad begins. That there's like that Apollo is shooting his arrows of plague at the men. And so Agamemnon has to give up his girl, his war prize, his slave, back to her father. And so in revenge, he takes Achilles' woman, Briseis.
Yeah.
And then Achilles sulks in his tent.
In A Song of Achilles, when Achilles took Briseis, that was very much set up as a heroic act because he was saving her and did not rape her in Song of Achilles. Is it portrayed that way in the one that you read that is told from her point of view?
Oh, yeah. He's like this horrible rapist. Like,
Interesting. So there really are a lot of different interpretations out there.
Yeah, definitely. And the ancient Greeks were so, it's such a patriarchal society. I mean, such a patriarchy that it was just, like, was it rape? Was it sex? Was there a difference? Like, it's just so messed up and hard for the modern woman to like, and hopefully man, to like wrap their mind around, It's just, and in that other book, in The Silence of the Girls, it's just like living in this horrible situation where women have like, little to no value. So, I mean, I definitely prefer, more compassionate Achilles and a more compassionate, like, ancient man.
Yeah, I loved him in this book. I thought their relationship was beautiful. And I assume that's, the truth. I get that we don't know what truth is in terms of mythology, but I was really surprised at how many people said, I thought this was a retelling of Achilles, but it's just a gay love story. And I was like, wait,
what do you think Achilles is, man?
Do we not all already know that? Even with my miniature knowledge of Greek mythology, but that's not known, I guess.
Well, I think that it's really been covered up. I think that there's been a real movement, especially with the Victorian archaeologists, to change the narrative that they weren't lovers, but friends, and pretend that homosexuality wasn't a thing, when it so clearly was. So I think, anybody who really studies the ancient world knows that there was a sexual fluidity to it that we don't have now. But there's been a real movement to kind of hetero wash, I've heard, the narrative to say like, oh, they were all what we would now call straight, even though there was no such thing back then.
So then she seems to be really sort of, because her books are, Madeline Miller, who wrote this, she's really changing the tide of thought on that, isn't she?
Well, she's really a classicist who tells the stories according to the myths. And so, it depends on who the audience is. It's, I guess, like, I think of this as a love story, but, if somebody's like, it's a gay love story, it's like, it's that marked language that means that person's uncomfortable with it. But it's like, you can, this is Achilles. This is a truer version of Achilles.
As I was reading this, I kept thinking, this book should be given to high school students first.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Do you think so? So you don't think that you need to start with the source material?
Well, I really feel like the most important thing is for it to be accessible, because especially now when like nobody can pay attention for more than 2 seconds, like I feel like people who are older and more serious can go to the source material, and the poetry is really beautiful, or can be depending on your translator, so it's like it's really nice to get like some of those sound bites in, but I feel like the more important part is for it to be compelling, to spark interest, to find some commonalities. I was thinking in the beginning how Patroclus is like, he's like nobody, and then the really cute guy likes him, and he's like suddenly the special one, which is like, every YA book or romance storyline, right? You're just like a regular plain person. The vampire loves you, or like the hot guy, whoever, and it's like he sees what's so special about you when nobody else does. Everybody loves that story because everyone can relate to that story, because we've all been that nobody who wants to be acknowledged by the hottie. I mean, it's ridiculous, but yeah, I like totally thought about like Twilight, or like hundreds of books that have that same, ooh, you're the special one, but he's the only one who can see it,
Yeah, it really does hit that trope, even though we're talking about an ancient story.
Yeah.
I have such admiration for authors who have this skill because I did learn against my will, but also she can tell a story. Like, so I could not put this book down.
So beautifully. I mean, her language and her significant details about like the soles of his feet, like it's just, and all the like little details, it's so beautiful. I felt like there are parts of a lot of the book felt like poetry.
I've never thought of listening to the Iliad on audio. That is a brilliant idea.
It blew me away because, I mean, I just like didn't really have the time, but while I was listening to sit down and read it like I had in the past, but while I was listening to it, I was just like picturing Homer like gathered around some campfire or like brazier in a hall, like telling the story. And I was like, and I'm getting groceries, or like getting out of my car, or walking the dog, or putting the kids to sleep. But it was like so cool to have that in my ear, something that has been told for thousands of years.
It really makes you part of a very ancient tradition as well. Hearing it the way it's supposed to be heard. Are your kids into the ancients at all? Do they pay attention to Greek mythology?
No, not really. I feel like it's like they're, every generation rebels against the previous generation. I saved all my like Percy Jackson books for them, and they have very little interest, but they do know the stories.
They had no choice.
I tried to make them watch Troy with me because I thought it would be like fun, and they just kind of ruined it by talking the whole time. But then they were like, they only knew about the Trojan horse. They didn't know like how it got there, who won, or what it was all about. But, I wasn't really either at their age. It came later. So there's still hope.
The other thing I want to ask you about is, how is the Drunk Book Club doing? What are you guys up to? Tell me all about it.
Drunk Book Club is going 5 years, going strong. We're reading Luster by Raven Leilani next week. And I'm almost done with it, which is pretty good because most Drunk Book Club members read it the night before.
Okay.
It's pretty impressive that an idea that came about at a party, like, hey, it'd be so much fun to have a book club, we could call it Drunk Book Club, like actually is still happening.
I would imagine they are drunker now that you're meeting on Zoom, right?
In many ways, they are drunker.
So, and that is through the bookstore, right?
Well, so my husband used to work at Skylight, and then one of the members of DBC, as we call it, is worked. A couple of them worked at Skylight, and one is the manager of Skylight.
I see.
So it's great because, some of them are in other book clubs as well. And so it's just really nice to talk about books with people whose whole careers are about books. Yeah.
I would think so. What do we know about Madeline Miller? Is she writing? She's one of those authors who takes a long time between books, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what she's doing now, but I have heard that there's supposed to be like an HBO show on Circe.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Did you like Circe?
I did. And I was surprised because I actually, that was one of the Drunk Book Club books that everybody liked, which is very rare, you know, people in a room and different opinions and stuff. I liked it a lot, but I was surprised to see that there were a lot of criticisms of it.
Oh.
Circe wasn't involved in all of those myths, or it was too much of a span, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the point of view, but my only issue is, for me, I'm more interested. I'm looking at these myths they were kind of retold by the last city standing. So it's we get the Athenian viewpoint from a lot of stories. And so I'm interested in my own writing in looking at it from a different perspective. But that didn't stop me from really enjoying reading Madeline Miller's more traditional Western Greek version.
So do you mean in your writing, you're writing from the conquered city point of view?
A lot of times, yeah. Or the city that didn't, the city that didn't get to write the stories down. So I've been really interested in the story of the Minotaur and Pasiphae. Do you know this story?
Okay, I know what a Minotaur is. That's a bull, right?
So the story is that King Minos wanted to be king of Crete, and he had a dispute with his brothers. And then Poseidon sent him a bull from the sea to acknowledge his kingship of Crete. King Minos was like, this bull is so beautiful. He sacrificed another bull in its place. And in revenge, Poseidon made Minos's wife, Pasiphae, who's Circe's sister, crazy in lust with the bull.
As you do.
Which is, what happens when your husband's an idiot. And so she got Daedalus to build her a cow, and she went inside the cow and had sex with the bull, and that's how the Minotaur was born.
Because she was actually human inside a cow's body.
Well, she's like a Titaness, or what was Circe? Like a demigoddess.
Okay, so the person who interests you most in that story is Pasiphae.
Well, what interests me most in that story is the idea that the Athenians made up that story to slander her and call their enemy, and a powerful woman, because she's also like a witch queen, like Circe, like she had some magic, right? So the thing in the story that interests me is that the Athenians basically made up this story to be like, she's a bullfucker, and to make you look bad. And
so how do we reframe that into making her?
The other thing is, it's also the gods don't punish the guy who's the jerk, right? They punish his wife. So, I mean, there's that whole part of their pantheon. And also, there's a lot we don't know about the Minoan world, but we know that they did worship goddesses, and women had a kind of power that women didn't in Athens.
I see.
So I've started looking at these stories more okay, what does this actually mean? And kind of looking at it at a deeper level and from a different perspective. So that's what's been really intriguing to me. But again, all of this doesn't take away my enjoyment of reading the book Circe, even though I have I'm like, oh, she fucked the bull.
That is so interesting. I love how you do that, how you take you read the story and then you go, I want to hear it from her point of view. That's so great.
Well, like, why would the Athenians be telling this story? It's like, because there's this powerful woman across the sea in this like culture they don't really understand. And so, let's make her look really bad. It's just such a funny way to insult a group of people that worship a bull.
Yeah. Not only is she a slut.
I mean, it was a really hot bull. He was so hot that Minos refused to sacrifice. So,
yeah. That's okay. First of all, we do not slut shame on this show. And second of all, we haven't seen him. How do we know?
Judge, yeah.
Judge?
But yeah, so that, I mean, I just started looking at that story like, wait a minute, who's telling the story about these ancient people and why?
I want to thank you, first of all, for introducing me to this book, because it immediately, as I told you, I could not put it down. And it immediately went on my top 10 of the year, where I'm sure it will stay.
That's
probably
awesome.
Top 10 of my life. I loved it so much. The whole time I was reading, I was telling my kids, oh my God, you got to read this book, because I've got a son who's a Percy Jackson maniac. And
this is definitely the next level.
Oh yeah, he's going to love it. And my daughter loves a good love story. So I cannot wait to pass this on to everybody. So thank you for putting this book in my hands. Why don't you tell our listeners all the places they can find you online?
Okay. I am almost everywhere online. My books are available on Amazon. I have an author page on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and I have a website, which is www.zenobianeil.com.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. It is always so fun to talk to you, and I can't wait till we can actually do this in real life someday. So I don't know, 2025 maybe.
Right. Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you for having me. It's so much fun to talk about books with you.
Thank you, Zenobia. It's a delight, and I hope you will come back soon.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening, bookworms. For more information on this episode and links to all the books we discussed, please go to our website, bestbookeverpodcast.com, or follow the podcast on Instagram at bestbookeverpodcast. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and you can find me everywhere as Julie Wrote a Book. Remember, when you're doing your book shopping, please help support indie bookstores and this podcast by using my affiliate link at bookshop.com/bestbookever. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you at the library.
The Athenians basically like made up this story to be like, she's a bullfucker, and to make you look bad.